In the village of Mbali, the earth does not just sit beneath your feet, it claims you. It is a deep, eternal red, a dust that rises with every footstep to coat the walls of the mud huts and the hems of the women's vibrant dresses. In Mbali, the air always carries a signature, the sharp scent of burning mahogany and the sweet, heavy aroma of ripening fruit. At the center of this world was Jabu. To look at Jabu was to look at the sun itself, too bright to stare at for long, and seemingly the source of all warmth. His laughter was not a sound, it was an event. It rolled through the red-dusted streets like a summer thunderstorm, deep and vibrating. When Jabu clapped his hands, the villagers felt the rhythm of life returning to their weary bones. He stood today on a platform of hand-hewn timber, his vibrant red tunic a splash of blood against the golden hour light. "Look at these hands," Jabu bellowed, thrusting his callous palms toward the sky. "Do you see the dust of the fields? I did not just harvest the millet this year, I wrestled it from the soil. The earth tried to keep its bounty, but I told the ground, not today. Mbali must eat." The crowd roared. Men slapped each other's backs, and women all related, their voices rising in a sharp, joyous harmony. Jabu basked in it. He drank their praise like a man dying of thirst. But if you looked closer, if you were as observant as the hawk circling above the savannah, you would see it. The slight, rhythmic tremor in his fingers. The way his eyes darted to the horizon whenever the wind shifted. Jabu was a man carrying a mountain inside a cardboard box. He hoarded a sorrow he claimed was a shield for others, but in truth, it was a shroud for himself. He had convinced the village he was a giant so that no one would notice he was actually trembling. As the villagers began to gather the grains, the atmosphere was electric.
The earth has truly
Jabu moved
blessed
among
us
them
this
like a
season.
king. He grabbed a
give
handful
thanks
of
for the
grain,
harvest.
smelling it deeply, his blue shirt gleaming.
The earth
"The
has
scent of
provided
victory,"
for us
he
all.
cried. He told the young men a story of how he had outrun a brush fire to save the western plot. It was a lie, the fire had been a small controlled burn, but in Jabu's telling, it was a wall of flame 30 feet high. He described the heat singeing his hair, the roar of the wind, and his final, heroic leap to safety. By the time he finished, the young men were looking at him with worship in their eyes. Jabu felt his power growing. He felt invincible. But then, he felt a gaze that didn't match the rest. Asha stood by the path, her hand-stitched green dress blending into the foliage. She was only 20, but her hazel eyes held the weight of a grandmother's wisdom. She didn't cheer. She didn't clap. She simply watched. She saw the way Jabu's smile didn't reach his eyes. She saw the way he gripped his own arms as if to keep himself from flying apart. Asha knew that a man who shouts that loud is usually trying to drown out a voice only he can hear. Jabu caught her gaze and felt a cold shiver. He laughed louder to compensate, shaking off her scrutiny like water from a dog's back. Desperate to maintain the illusion, Jabu organized a feast of memories. The aroma of spiced meats wafted through the village square as Jabu took center stage. He was a master of the moment, his muscular frame draped in a colorful patterned shirt that seemed to vibrate with energy. He began to juggle ripe mangoes, his dark eyes lit with a manic joy. He told tales of ancestors who grew yams as large as boulders, and the villagers, desperate for a distraction from the heat, laughed until their sides ached. To the children, he was a god. To the adults, he was the only thing keeping the fear of a failed harvest at bay. Desperate to maintain the illusion, Jabu organized a feast of memories. The aroma of spiced meats wafted through the village square as Jabu took center stage. He was a master of the moment, his muscular frame draped in a colorful patterned shirt that seemed to vibrate with energy. He began to juggle ripe mangoes, his dark eyes lit with a manic joy. He told tales of ancestors who grew yams as large as boulders, and the villagers, desperate for a distraction from the heat, laughed until their sides ached. To the children, he was a god. To the adults, he was the only thing keeping the fear of a failed harvest at bay. The celebration eventually faded into the mundane heat of the afternoon. Jabu found himself alone at the village well. The reddish dust hung thick in the air, making the world look like a fading photograph. He leaned over the rough stone, looking at his reflection in the murky water. The man in the water didn't look like a hero. He looked tired. His skin glistened with a sweat that wasn't from work, but from the exhaustion of the performance. Jabu thought back to the grain stores he had failed to protect years ago. He thought of the hunger that followed. He had promised himself then that Mbali would never be afraid again. He would provide the hope even if he had to invent it. But the water in the well was lower than it had been yesterday. The somber truth was rising, and no amount of laughter could push it back down. Later that day, the village elders gathered under the great baobab. The mood shifted. Mama Tando, the healer whose skin was a map of 70 years of survival, stood up. She didn't have Jabu's lungs, but her voice carried further. "We must be cautious," she whispered, her hands clenching her woven basket. "The river has stopped singing. It is whispering now. It speaks to those who listen, and it says the heart of the earth is drying up. We must ration the water. We must prepare for a lean season." The villagers murmured. Fear, cold and sharp, began to ripple through the crowd. Jabu felt his authority slipping. If the people feared the drought, they would stop believing in his miraculous harvest. He couldn't let reality win. Jabu leapt to the center stage. He threw his head back and let out a laugh that rang against the thatched roofs. "Mama Tando," he shouted, his bright yellow shirt catching the sun. "Your only gift is knitting tails and tying knots. You are an old woman dreaming of ghosts. The river is fine. I walked past it this morning and it was flowing like a king's wine. Why do you bring shadows to our feast?" He turned to the villagers, his gesture sweeping. "Do you believe this old woman who sees omens in the dust? Or do you believe your own eyes? Look at the grain. Look at me. Mbali is strong." The villagers looked at Mama Tando, then at Jabu. Jabu was tall, muscular, and smiling. Mama Tando was small and smelled of herbs. They chose the smile. They chose the lie. They began to laugh with him, mocking the old woman's warning. But as the laughter echoed, Jabu saw Asha. She was petrified in silence. Her green eyes were no longer bemused, they were burning. She watched Jabu mock the woman who had birthed half the village. She saw the silent fury in her stance, the taut body language of someone who has just seen a sacred thing defied. Jabu's heart hammered against his ribs. He had won the crowd, but he was losing the one person who actually saw him. The next morning, the village square was quiet, but the air was heavy. Mama Tando sat in her small herbal stall, surrounded by woven baskets and the potent scent of dried roots. Her silver hair reflected the morning light. She didn't look angry, she looked patient. She knew that the truth didn't need to shout to be heard. Jabu walked past, trying to avoid her gaze, but her presence was a silent anchor in a village that was drifting into a dream. That evening, while Jabu paced the outskirts of the village, Asha sat with Mama Tando. The air was cool, filled with the scent of freshly woven grass and the sound of crickets. They worked in silence for a long time, their fingers moving gracefully through the fibers. "He is not a bad man, Asha," Mama Tando said softly, her silver hair shimmering in the twilight. "He is just a man who is terrified of being ordinary. He thinks if he is not a hero, he is nothing. But a hero who ignores a fire only ensures the house burns down." Asha looked at her teacher. "He lied about the river, Mama. He lied to make them feel good, but the thirst will come regardless. How do we stop a man who has convinced everyone that the truth is an insult?" Mama Tando smiled sadly. "You do not stop him. You wait. The truth is like the roots of the baobab. You can build a house over them, you can pave the earth, but the roots will eventually crack the floor. With red earth. Every time the wind rustled the leaves, he heard Mama Tando's voice. Every time a bird chirped, he thought it was Asha's judgment. He was trapped in his own shadows of doubt. He had built a tower of bravado so high that he couldn't find the stairs to get down. He thought of the loan he had taken from the neighboring village, a debt he had hidden from everyone, to buy the extra grain that made the harvest look so bountiful. He was a fraud. A golden, laughing fraud. He looked at the gnarled roots of the tree and wished he could bury himself beneath them. The next morning, Jabu tried to find peace. He found Asha under the mango tree. The ground was littered with ripe fruit, the smell sweet and cloying. He decided to play the jester one more time. Asha, why so serious? He laughed, picking up a mango and juggling it. The sun is out, the fruit is sweet, and you look like you're attending a funeral. Asha didn't smile. She picked up a mango and looked at it. It's sweet on the outside, Jabu. But look, she squeezed the fruit. A small, black worm crawled out of the skin. The rot starts at the center. By the time you see it on the outside, it's too late to save the tree. Jabu stopped juggling. The golden hue of the twilight seemed to turn cold. The shared laughter he tried to force felt like ash in his mouth. What do you want from me, Asha? He whispered, his bravado finally cracking. I want the man who cried when the grain stores burned 3 years ago, she said. I want the man who is afraid. Because that man is real. This man in the red tunic, he is just a ghost. While Jabu struggled with his conscience, Asha sought clarity. She climbed the stairs of a local shrine, her flowing orange dress swaying with her determined steps. The air here was different, thick with the scent of incense and the weight of ancestors. She stared at the altar, her hazel eyes searching for an answer. She felt a longing for freedom, not from the village, but from the web of lies Jabu had woven around them all. Days later, Jabu and Asha found themselves walking a narrow path through a field of wildflowers. Asha gathered the blooms, her pink dress a bright contrast to the red dust. Jabu walked beside her, his expression unusually forlorn. For a moment, they won the jester and the observer. They were just two souls walking on an interwoven pathway. The silence between them wasn't empty, it was full of things unsaid. They stopped by a low stone wall. Asha sat, cradling a mango as if it were a precious stone. Jabu, she said, her voice soft against the murmurs of the village in the distance. Kindness isn't always telling people what they want to hear. Sometimes, kindness is the truth that hurts. Jabu looked at her, and for a fleeting second, his eyes weren't searching the horizon. They were looking at her. She stood by the village water source later that afternoon. The breeze pulled at her hair. She looked at the water, murky, low, and stagnant. Her heart was heavy with hope and uncertainty. She knew the storm was coming, and she knew Jabu wasn't ready to lead them through it. As dusk fell, they walked back together. The village was coming alive with the sounds of evening fires and distant drums. Asha tried to lighten the mood, her playful spirit shining through her purple dress. Jabu laughed, but it was a hollow sound. The echoes in the dark were the sounds of his own lies catching up to him. They sat by a glimmering pond as the stars began to pierce the velvet sky. Jabu, in a maroon shirt that matched the deepening shadows, sat beside her white-clad fawn. They didn't speak. In the silence, they found a connection that words had only served to complicate. The frogs croaked a rhythmic melody, and for a moment, the world felt balanced. The balance broke at the next community meeting. Under the flickering candlelight, Asha stood up to address him. Her lavender dress was a beacon of calm. She didn't shout, she spoke with a firm open body language. She challenged his narrative, her eyes locking onto his. Jabu felt the vulnerability he had spent years hiding finally rise to the surface. It was a confrontation, yes, but it was also an invitation to come home to the truth. The change came faster than anyone expected. Not as a drought, but as a storm that brought no rain, only wind and thunder. Jabu stood atop a hill, the dark clouds rolling in like an invading army. The wind tore at his rugged gear, his brow furrowed in genuine defiance. This was the moment he had rehearsed. The hero against the elements. But the thunder didn't sound like applause. It sounded like a reckoning. The dust of Mbali rose in a great red shroud, choking the air. The villagers ran for cover, their joy turned to panic. Jabu screamed at the sky, his piercing dark eyes filled with a desperate need to control the uncontrollable. I am Jabu. I am the provider, but the wind only screamed back. He realized then that nature didn't care about his stories. The leopard he claimed to have killed didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was the bitter water in the well. When the wind died down, the village was split. The storm had revealed the truth, that the bountiful grain had been stored improperly and was now rotting in the damp heat. The hungry reality had arrived. Jabu stood in the square, his bright orange tunic looking ridiculous amidst the ruins. The villagers were no longer clapping. They were murmuring. They were looking at the empty grain bags and then at him. You told us we were rich. Kofi shouted. You said the river was flowing, another cried. Jabu's fractured authority was on full display. He tried to gesture animatedly, to tell one more tale, but the words died in his throat. He looked at the sea of angry, confused faces. He saw the elders shaking their heads. He saw Mama Tando standing resilient, her woven basket still in her hand. Mama Tando stepped forward. The sun shifted behind her, casting Jabu in a long, dark shadow. The jester has run out of jokes, she said, her voice steady. Jabu, you thought you were protecting us from sorrow. But you only protected us from the truth. And because we were not told the truth, we did not prepare. The hunger is not your fault, but the lie is. Jabu stood rigid. His hands quivered violently. The fitted black shirt he wore felt like it was strangling him. He looked at the crowd, searching for one person to believe in him. He found Asha. She was standing at a distance, the harsh sunlight reflecting in her deep green eyes. She didn't look angry anymore. She looked devastated. She had wanted him to tell the truth on his own terms. Now, the truth had torn him open in front of everyone. The isolation in her stance was a mirror to his own. She was the only one who understood the gravity of his soul's collapse. The next morning found Jabu at the village intersection. The sun beat down on his weathered tunic. He looked at the path leading away from Mbali, and the path leading back to the square. He was at a crossroads of choices. He could run, or he could stay and face the wreckage of his reputation. He sought solace under the mango tree again. He sat cross-legged in his torn green shirt, looking up at the canopy. The silence was no longer heavy, it was empty. He was stripped of his tunic, his platform, and his lies. He was just Jabu. He walked to the water's edge and found Mama Tando. She stood in her deep blue dress, looking out at the ripples. She didn't scold him. She simply watched the water with him. In her eyes, he saw a hope that retires but never fades. She was waiting for the man to emerge from the shadow of the jester. He climbed the hillside as the sun began to set. The light caught the swirling dust around him. He looked out over the village, the huts, the people, the red earth. He finally understood that Mbali didn't need a hero to save them. They needed a neighbor to walk with them. It was his moment of clarity. He returned to the community hall. He was dressed in a worn white tunic, the gold embroidery a reminder of what he used to be. The villagers were hesitant. He didn't shout. He spoke of the death. He spoke of the rot. He admitted the forgery of the success he had claimed. His shoulders were heavy, but for the first time, he was standing on solid ground. As the sky turned crimson and amber, the conversation deepened. Jabu stood before them, his cranberry-colored tunic fluttering. He wasn't center stage, he was in the circle. He spoke until the sun dipped below the horizon, answering every angry question with the simple, painful truth. That night, there was no bonfire. No music. The village was silent, save for the sound of hungry stomachs. Jabu walked to the edge of the hill, watching the first light of dawn pierce the darkness. He was alone. The red tunic was gone, replaced by an earth-toned shirt that fit loosely on his broad shoulders. He looked down at his hands, the hands that had wrestled the earth. They were just hands. Tired, shaking, human hands. The shattered facade was complete. For the first time in his life, Jabu didn't want to laugh. He didn't want to tell a story. He wanted to sit in the dirt and be still. He realized that the sorrow he had been holding wasn't a shield, it was a weight. And by dropping it, he felt a strange, terrifying lightness. He heard footsteps. Asha was standing at the bridge over the river. She was staring into the water, her white tunic fluttering in the breeze. Jabu walked up and stood beside her. "The water is still bitter," he said, his voice raw. "Yes," Asha replied. "But now we know it is bitter. Now we can find a way to sweeten it. We cannot fix a problem we pretend does not exist." She turned to him. The ethereal glow of the noon sun caught her dark hair. "The villagers are angry, Jabu. But they are also lost. They spent so long believing in your strength that they forgot their own. You have to go back. Not as a hero. Not as a jester. But as a man." Jabu went back. He didn't stand on a platform. He joined the villagers in the actual harvest, the small, difficult one they had left. He walked in his light blue shirt, his muscles taut as he picked fruit alongside the men he had once mocked. Asha was there, her flower sundress a splash of color against the hard work. Weeks later, they held a small dance. It wasn't the feast of memories, with its fake meat and loud boast. It was a night of revelations. Asha danced in a shimmering red dress, her movements fluid and real. Jabu stood nearby, his laughter finally carrying the weight of a man who had earned his joy. At the final public meeting, Jabu crouched in the dirt with the people. He wasn't the shadow director anymore. He was a participant. He and Asha shared a moment of light and understanding, their eyes meeting across the circle of villagers. The dialogue was no longer a performance, it was the foundation of a new Mbali. Months passed. The recovery was slow. The hunger was real, but it was shared. Because it was shared, it was bearable. One evening, under a star-studded sky, a small bonfire crackled. It wasn't the roaring feast of the past, but it was warm. The villagers gathered, their diverse attire a mosaic of traditional prints. Jabu sat in the circle. He wasn't at the center. He was just a part of the ring. He wore a simple white shirt. He wasn't laughing. He was listening. Asha sat beside him, sharing a fresh mango with a group of children. The atmosphere was electric, not with the high-strung energy of a lie, but with the quiet heart of unity. The smell of grilled meat wafted through the air, and for the first time, Jabu felt the weight of the village was not on his shoulders alone. It was held by everyone. As the fire died down to glowing embers, Jabu walked to the edge of the village. He looked at the horizon, painted in deep oranges and blues. He thought of the jester he used to be. That man was gone, buried under the red dust of Mbali. He felt the quiet vigilance of hope. He knew the next harvest would be hard. He knew there would be more storms. But he also knew he didn't have to conjure the rain with his laughter. He just had to be there to catch it when it fell. Jabu closed his eyes and breathed in the scent of the earth. It was still red. It was still dusty. But it was finally home. In the village of Mbali, they still tell the story of the man whose laughter could wake the roosters. But they don't tell it as a story of a hero. They tell it as a reminder that the strongest thing a man can ever do is admit he is weak. They say a mask is only useful for a masquerade, but a face is what you need to look at the sun. Comment below, have you ever felt the weight of a mask you were afraid to take off? We are reading every story. Subscribe to African Chronicle Tales for more journeys into the heart of our land.